What's up, everyone? Bales here with another edition of our MLB DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Wednesday, September 15th. We have two slates, one decent, one is only 4 games. So obviously the 4-game early slate and then a larger 10-game late slate that is extremely interesting, if you ask me, just because we have some high-priced pitchers. I don't think you necessarily have to go there. There's some guys that you can spend down on that are in really good spots. So just a lot going on in this situation. As always, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You can turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Just click the little bell and leave any comments you have below. The more engagement, the better. I will be here to answer any questions, respond to any comments, home run calls, just picks that you guys like to see if we're on the same page and everything. I'll respond to everything that I can throughout the day. Also, I do want to mention that we do have our first NFL podcast of the week. The Cash Process is up with Anthony and Ben. You can find that on our YouTube channel. And then Ben, me, and Matty Ice will be recording the NFL main pod that we do every Wednesday night. We'll be recording that late tonight and get it out as soon as possible. So that'll be up probably around like 11 p.m. tonight. More or less will probably be pushed on Thursday. But I did want to get that out there. If you are also NFL fans, you can head over to dfskarma.com to get all of our free content. We have MLB stuff. We're going to have NFL stuff start rolling out today, then tomorrow, and just throughout the week. We have plenty of NFL content along with our MLB stuff. You can find our pricing and everything for our core plays packages. You get the projections portal, which Sam has done an outstanding job with, and everything along with that. Everything that you need also is in the description below. So you can click to show more and find all of our links to that, including our socials. And then as well, if you're a sports bettor just happening to be watching this podcast, you can head to betkarma.com and get everything that we offer there. Just really good sites, a lot of information that you guys can apply to your craft in this situation. But let's get down to breaking down this slate. If we start at pitcher, so it's clear to me at the top. I guess that's how I'll start instead of just the best guys that I like and everything. It's pretty clear to me at the top that if you're spending up, you're going all the way up. Julio Urias has just a fantastic Vegas line. He's over a minus 300 favorite. The game's only set at 8 runs. The Diamondbacks have by far the lowest implied total on the entire slate. I would say Urias is the safest option on this slate. If you can get to him, 100% feel free. He's scored 25 DraftKings points in 3+. He's been consistent recently. And then obviously we talked about the matchup is just fantastic. The other option at the top of this slate is going to be Jose Urquidy. Not nearly as consistent. He's really been struggling in his last few, but he does get a solid matchup against the Texas Rangers. He has a plus Vegas line. I think that he's pretty clearly behind Urias if you're getting to the top, but at the same time in cash games, if you want to play both of them, absolutely no real issues with that. He's still a minus 200 favorite. It's just the game set a little bit higher because Texas hasn't been, total trash recently. There was a decent amount of time where you could just kind of throw anyone against Texas and it would work, but we're not really sitting on that anymore. So it's kind of a spot where you don't have to play someone like Urquidy tonight. But even so, over the last 14 days, their team WOBA is still only 302. Their strikeout rate is around 22%, which isn't that high, but also it's not really that bad. So I think at the top of this position, very clear, Julio Urias 1, Jose Urquidy 2. Then you start to move down a little bit. I think you can take some odd shots like Joe Musgrove. I don't really have any major issues with Sean Manaea, whatever, feel free. I don't like those two that much. I think the next one that I would go to is Tyler Mcgill. He has at least flashed a ton of upside. He's been a little bit inconsistent, but the strikeout rate is there. He gets a plus matchup against the St. Louis Cardinals. Very good Vegas total. Their implied team total sits below 4. And when you look at what they've been doing over the last 14 days. Team WOBA is only 311, not great. Strikeout rate 24.5%, which it's, I guess I would say it's one of the higher on the slate. It ranks like fifth or so around that over the last 14 days. And Mcgill has all the advanced metrics that you want. His xFIP is basically 375. His strikeout rate's over 27% on the season. Swinging strike over 12.5%. So everything lines up for a good game out of Tyler Mcgill. The only issue is that he's 9,200, and at 89, you have Huascar Yona. Obviously gets the plus matchup against the Rockies, who will be on the road. We know that the Rockies have a bad road offense. Yona, I believe he has the lowest xFIP on the entire slate at 3.42. He's only thrown about 75 innings. So we have a larger sample size on a lot of guys like Urias. But still looks outstanding. His strikeout rate is 27%. We know that there's plenty of strikeouts to be had in the Rockies lineup, especially on the road. So Yona is probably one of the top options that I would say. Also, just a fantastic Vegas line. For the Atlanta Braves, they're almost minus 200 favorites. The game's set at only 8.5 runs, which isn't great, but it's also not that bad. I would say at the moment, he would probably be the SP2 that I would want to pair with Urias. I think that there's other options you can use. I think Miguel's 100% fine, but I would assume that most of the ownership moves to Yona. And then as you drop down farther, there's just one more guy who is consistently underpriced. It's Ranger Suarez. He gets a matchup against the Chicago Cubs. They will be playing in Philly. He's now scored 20-plus fantasy points in 4 straight. Aside from one against the Marlins where he was super efficient and only threw 71 pitches, he's thrown 95-plus pitches in 3 of his last 4. So the pitch counts there. It was almost at 90 before that. He looks completely stretched out. When you look at all of his metrics, 3.57 xFIP, his home run per 9 is at 0.35. Strikeout rate's up to 25%. And although the Cubs have found some success over the last 14 days, their strikeout rate is still 26% over that span. So I feel like Ranger Suarez is just in a really, really good spot. And if you want to spend down for your SP2, I feel like he's the pretty clear-cut option. There's not really anyone else that's super cheap that I think is even close to him. And that's more or less present in the Vegas odds as well. I think Nestor Cortez is slightly interesting, but I'm not really going to take that shot. Overall, I do believe you can limit your pool quite a bit. There are other guys that you can consider, but I think when looking at it, you could just create a pool of Urias, Urquidy, Yona, Mcgill, and then probably Suarez. And I think that you could just move along with that as your pool and have no issues. So I'm going to move to stacks now. If there's any pitchers that I didn't talk about, because obviously this is more or less a larger slate, just feel free to ask in the comments. I'll let you know my thoughts on them. 100% no issues with that. At the top of the stacks, I mean, there are a lot of options. I feel like the same way we have some dominant pitchers that we feel really good about, we're also going to have some really good offenses that kind of stick out. The first one I think seems pretty obvious is the Chicago White Sox. They get a matchup against Jansen Junk. It's just a really good matchup. I'm not really overly worried about the Angels bullpen or anything. So the White Sox probably stick out the most. I believe their implied team total is the highest on the slate as well. So others will likely be thinking that. Then you have, I want to say the New York Yankees are second against John Means, but I don't think that I would personally put them there. I think I would put them behind the Houston Astros, who get a matchup against Kohei Arihara. He's just not a good pitcher. On the season, xFIP is basically 5.4. His home run per 9 is 2.2. It's just absolutely terrible. And obviously the Houston Astros are one of the hotter offenses in the MLB, even though they did let us down last night. I feel like they're probably in the second best spot, followed by the New York Yankees, then the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I think rounding up them, the bottom of this top 5 would be the Philadelphia Phillies. We're in a really weird spot for some of these, I guess, some of these stacks, just because when you look at some of the worst pitchers on the slate, right, you have guys like Griffin Jacks, who we always want to target. But at the same time, tonight he gets a matchup against Cleveland, who is literally one of the coldest offenses in the MLB. Over the last 14 days, Team WOBA of .263. I think that actually is the lowest in the entire slate. Strikeout rate of almost 28% over that span. So it kind of limits what you can do because you don't really want to stack that cold of an offense. But at the same time, Griffin Jacks is probably the worst pitcher on the slate, and he's really one of the worst pitchers in the entire MLB. So kind of have to make a decision there. I think because there's so many other spots that we can go, I don't think that we have to use someone like Cleveland. I will say the other stack that I would like to add, just because they get the matchup against John Lester, who I don't think is good, is the New York Mets. They've been playing relatively decent over their last 14 days. So I do think that the New York Mets are also a very reasonable stack on this slate. If you have any other questions about stacks, feel free to comment. Let me know what you're thinking, and I'll let you know what I'm thinking. Also, I do want to point out that weather will probably play a big part in stacks tonight, and at the moment, I haven't looked too much into weather. I don't generally do that until much closer to the slate, but obviously you're going to have to account for wind, but I'm not sure on today. I'm going to have to check it out, but I know that last night there were really cold temperatures out west. The Giants game was like 60 degrees, which kind of put me off of them because I don't really want to use a team in 60-degree weather when there's other teams that are playing when it's 90. Obviously, they looked okay. They scored 6 runs. They had a really good matchup against Jake Arrieta. But at the same time, generally stuff like that could really hurt a team. And I'm not 100% sure if we're still hitting that cold front out on the out west. It looks like the Dodgers game is expected to be about 65. And that's obviously in LA. So I don't know. We're definitely going to have to monitor the weather, and that's just another reason to be in the Karma Discord, which is 100% free. Chatdfs.com. It's also in the description below. You can get in for completely free. We'll discuss stuff throughout the day and everything there. So I would recommend joining. But at this time, I think we can move on to position by position. Before we head there, I do want to quick shout out our partners, Jock Market, JOCKMKT. It is fantasy sports meets the stock market. It's a really fun app. Essentially, you buy shares of players. Depending on how they do on a slate, you get rewarded with specific amounts of money. We've been very successful. We've been doing a lot for it for NFL, but also basically daily for MLB. 100% free advice, again, in the Karma Discord, so you're going to want to join there. If you download the app, deposit $50, get up to $100, or you'll get 100% deposit bonus up to $50, which will give you $100. And then they're also running for us anyone in NFL that loses money on their first $100 that they play will get it all back. So if you use our code to deposit, you get a free $50. So for $50, you get a risk-free $100 on their app. It's a really good deal, and obviously we'll help you through everything if you need it in the Karma Discord. So 100%, I would highly recommend getting that. We can move to position by position, though. I think at catcher, there are several solid spend-ups. It's tough to say that there's one way to go here, but I think that if you're spending up, you probably go all the way to 5,100 with Yasmani Grandal. If you can't get to him, Will Smith at 49 is fine. JT Realmuto at 46 is a little too cheap. I have no issues whatsoever with that. Even Gary Sanchez at 38, it's kind of too low of a price tag. Yan Gomes at 4, I like. And then if you're looking to save a bit of salary, I think that there are 2 options that stick out depending on how much salary you need to save. The first one is James McCann at 3,100 against John Lester. Second one, Roberto Perez at 2,300 against Griffin Jacks. One's kind of a pure punt, and one is low 3Ks, but comes with a ton of power against left-handed pitching. So that's probably more or less where I'm looking at for catcher. I think other things could open up depending on who's starting, just because we always get some weird lineups there. But we can move to first base here. I think you're starting first base. If you're all the way at the top, I think you're choosing between Freddie Freeman and Max Muncy. I would assume that's a tough choice between the two. I think I slightly like Max Muncy more just because of the matchup. I do like the matchup against Merrill Kelly, and Arizona's bullpen has been absolutely atrocious. So I think that's where I would slightly lean, but I don't think you go wrong with either of the two. If you need to drop down a little bit more, Jose Abreu feels like the clear-cut option at 4,200. A direct pivot off of him would be Anthony Rizzo at 43. And then if you need to drop down even farther, you have guys like Brad Miller or Gavin Sheets, who I do think that you can use. The only other guy that I really want to consider too much here would probably be Pete Alonso at 4,700, or just because he's been as hot as basically anyone in the MLB, and he's only 4,800. Brandon Belt makes an interesting option, but I don't like the matchup against Joe Musgrove. At second base, DJ LeMahieu continues to be super underpriced. 4,000 is just kind of ridiculous, especially leading off against left-handed pitching. I think he's suitable in all formats. And then if you want to get to the top of second base tonight, I think my number one option would be Jose Altuve. Number two option for the same price would be Ozzie Albies. And then obviously you have like Trey Turner if you want to use him. Right around 4,500, and it feels like he'll get no ownership because you're kind of in a dead spot there where you can drop down to LeMahieu, or it won't be that hard to get up to someone like Altuve. Josh Harrison makes a lot of sense leading off for Oakland against Mike Minor. That's probably about where I'm looking here. I do think that you can go with someone cheaper. La Stella at 3,200, 100% fine. Nick Gordon at 2,700. I don't have any issues with that as long as he's hitting like slightly higher in the order. I know he's projected to hit 6th at the moment. Or even someone like David Fletcher at 3,600. But to me, it feels obvious that DJ LeMahieu or Jose Altuve are one of the two that you're going. And then the specific GPP option that I like here would probably be Josh Harrison. Moving to third base. Let's see what we have here. I mean, again, you can just go with Alex Bregman. I mean, he's basically been underpriced for quite some time. It makes no sense that he's still only at 4,400. I feel like that's the very obvious worst price tag on the entire slate. If you want to spend all the way up to 6,000, Jose Ramirez, it has been cold, but obviously gets the plus matchup against Griffin Jacks, so I have no issues whatsoever if you want to try to move up to him. But for me, very clear-cut, Alex Bregman is the number one. And then if you need to save a bit of money, the number two probably is Yoan Moncada, who continues to be underpriced as well at only 3,700. Those are the two that I'm really focusing on for third base. There's not really much else that I want to do because it's not going to be difficult to get either one of them in your lineup. Moving to shortstop, I feel like this is pretty obvious that Kyle Seager continues to be underpriced. I've been using him for days on end now. I do think that you can bump up a little bit to Carlos Correa or Tim Anderson. Both of them are 100% fine. Francisco Lindor, if you need to drop down in price a little bit, Didi Gregorius gets a good matchup against Alec Mills, and he's been heating up a bit. And then if you basically need to punt the position, I would probably go all the way down to Gavin Lux at 2,600. He's also outfield eligible. So a lot of different options here. I think the number one for me very clearly continues to be Corey Seager, especially in those matchups. And then when you get to outfield, I mean, a lot going on here. But you can really just break it down by basically teams. The Philadelphia Phillies, their entire outfield can be used. The New York Yankees, their entire outfield can be used. The Houston Astros, Generally have some cheaper guys that you can use along with, Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, all great options. Luis Robert is a top option at 4,400. Eloy Jimenez at 3,800 is entirely too cheap specifically for this matchup. I do think that Mookie Betts is one of the top options on the slate as well. Looking for a few cheaper guys, we already talked about Gavin Sheets. Chase McCormick and Jose Siri obviously are right around the minimum price. Gavin Lux is one of the cheaper guys here that you can use. And then you have some guys for the Mets like Michael Conforto or Jeff McNeil who get the lefty-lefty matchup, but are under 4K. So I don't really have too many issues with guys like that. Kevin Pillar is at 3,000. Nick Gordon we already talked about. So there's a lot of different options here in the outfield. I don't want to go over basically everyone. If there's an outfielder that you like that I didn't mention, go ahead and say them in the comments. I'll let you know my thoughts on them. But just a lot to like at the position. I guess we can move along to the home run call. The last time I did a stream, I believe it was Yordan Alvarez, and he did indeed hit a home run. So let's try to keep the stream plays going a little bit. I think I'm going to go with... Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't want to go with anyone too obvious. Like, I feel like any of the Yankees guys, make pretty clear-cut options, specifically Aaron Judge. I'll go with Austin Hayes against Nestor Cortez. Cortez doesn't really give up that many home runs, but at 1.23 per 9, it's not like it's the lowest on the entire slate. So I'll go with Austin Hayes. I guess I probably don't feel as confident about that one as I generally do, but I do like the call. Austin Hayes has a lot of power against a left-handed pitching, so I will stick with Austin Hayes there. I do also think that he's underpriced and a very solid option on this slate. But once again, if you enjoy the content, please give us a thumbs up, comment anything that you have to say, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our content. Until then, good luck tonight, and someone will be back with the podcast tomorrow.